My name's Marie. Over there is Nikta. We're going to be your sort of co-hosts for today. We're both volunteers with the 46th Ward Neighbors Against Police Violence. So fortunately we were able to get a spot in the shade, but it is still pretty warm out, so just make sure you're looking after each other, drinking some water. We do have water and snacks over at the info table, so feel free to grab some of that if you need it. And also, thank you all for doing an excellent job just off the bat. I can see a lot of the top of everyone's faces and not a lot of the bottom, so that's what we want to see, and also keeping the social distancing between groups. Because we want to be able to keep each other safe while we're talking about keeping each other safe in the larger scheme of things. Some of you might have seen James Kappelman's town hall last month. It was a Zoom call. He had on a representative from COPA. You couldn't even see all the questions that were asked. They got to handpick it. That's not how we do things here. This is a people's town hall. We have representatives of the community here to speak. Can you give a round of applause to everyone who's going to be speaking today? And then once we're done with that, we're going to have an open mic. So if you're sitting there in the audience and you're like, I have a story about police violence, I have a question about CPAC, I have something I want to know that I want to share, I just want to get up here and say that I support you and I support what's going on, be ready to do that. Get that in your mind, because we're going to ask people to come up here and tell their stories and share their words. Does that sound good to all of you? Awesome. So please give a very warm welcome to our first speaker today, Miss Assata Lewis. Assata's a part of Kuma Link. She's a poet, playwright, and performing artist born and raised in Chicago. Through the Kuma Links Hip Hop Org, she's also been a mentor and a writing facilitator. She's used to speaking and writing to challenge harmful systems and begin to reimagine the world that we live in. Assata?
Hi, everybody. Can y'all hear me? All right. If everybody where they are can repeat after me and say peace, love, respect for myself, for everybody. Paz, amor, respeto para todos. Ashe, ashe, ashe. All right. Hello, good people. My name is Assata. I'm so blessed and welcome to speak to you about something that is very important and vital to the reimagining and the transformation of our community. I wrote a little something, and so I hope you guys resonate and actually hear something impactful from it, okay? I only have about 5 minutes out of respect for the other speakers, and 5 minutes is not enough time to talk about the detrimental impact police have had on our communities as Black and brown folks and people of color. 5 minutes is not enough time to talk about the history of death and corruption Chicago's law enforcement has had. I advise you to do your own research. The facts are plain as day. And if senseless death of unarmed Black and brown people on the internet is not enough for you, then I don't know what would be. So 5 minutes is just enough time to talk about life. It has been a heavy year, full of a lot of loss. Loss of heroes, loss of fathers, loss of mothers and family members. And while this year has been marked with a lot of death, this year gave us the opportunity to create life. Life that is built on the back of the legacy of all those we have lost. While we bury our dead, we also have the opportunity to bury the seeds of our future. A future free of fear, a future full of love and light, a future full of access and community, a future where every single person has the ability to be whoever and whatever they want to be. A future where Black and brown kids don't have to worry about death before they think about life, where they don't have to think about their parents being deported or being trapped in internment camps in cages like animals, a future where our communities are in charge. Police do not protect us. They have not protected us. The police has a legacy built on slave catching and keeping the order of the white institution we live under. Police are giving more money than schools, the mental health institutions, the community organizations. Police are giving money to terrorize and instill fear. Money that could go to the future we want to live in is being given to murder us in our homes, in our cars, in front of our children. But this is bigger than death and murder. This is about life. This is about justice. This is about speaking peace over our people. Do we not deserve $95 million that they put towards the police academy? $95 million can go towards jobs and books. Or let's think about what we could do with $4 million a day, which is what CPD gets and more. This money does not include the misconduct payout that the city has to settle with, which is around $662 million. Do the math. What would you give to your community with $95 million a day? As we move towards defunding police, because it will happen, as we move towards abolition, because it will happen, I want to challenge us to think about the world we want our families to grow up in. I want us to take our fear of the future and say, I'm scared of what this will look like. But I'm even more afraid of living in a world that is racist, sexist, misogynistic, homophobic, that is filled with more death than life. Defund the police because you are choosing life. Today, I choose life. If you can repeat after me, say peace, love, respect for myself, for everybody. We appreciate, we nurture, we give back to Mother Earth, we give back to each other, to our community, so that we may grow. Ashe, Ashe, Ashe. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was beautiful. Our next speaker is Karen Zachor from the Uptown Community High School. She's been an Uptown resident for over 40 years and is a board member of Northside Action for Justice and a member of the core caucus of the CTU.
Good afternoon, everyone. Wow, Assata is so inspiring, isn't she? Let's have another hand for her. We are so lucky at Uplift that Assata works with our students, so yay! I'm proud to be here today as a member of Northside Action for Justice. We're a community organization that's been around for quite a few years, and our predecessor organizations even some decades. And we work primarily on housing, human services, and education. Although recently, given the events going on in the nation and locally, we have added to our areas of focus police violence and defunding police, because that is so tied in with everything else we do. In fact, one of the things about Northside Action for Justice is that we really do believe that everything is connected and we have to fight for all these things at once. And so today I'm going to talk to you about how police and policing are connected to housing, and in specific, how Kappelman has used police as a tool of gentrification in this community. So James Kappelman, we've known him, I think 25 years, or probably Andy knows better, or Mark, but about that long. We got to know him around fighting about what would happen at the Wilson Yards property. That's where the Target and the Aldi are, as well as a senior building and a family housing building of affordable housing. We fought for the affordable housing. Kappelman and his allies fought against the affordable housing every step of the way. And this is where we got to know how racist he was, how opposed to anything that people in our community he was. He and his allies used fear and race baiting to try to win people over to their cause of no affordable housing by claiming that Uplift would become another Cabrini Green. So we've known who he was for a really long time. He did not just become this when he became the alderman. But as alderman, of course, he has more power, and we've lost at least 1,200 units of affordable housing since he's been the alderman. So you might be saying, well, okay, but what does this have to do with police? Well, gentrifiers have many tools at their disposal. And one of their tools is to use police to harass people that they deem undesirable. Harass them to the point of forcing them to move out of the neighborhood one way or another. So Kappelman and his fellow white homeowners became extremely adept at using the CAPS program to do this. Now, CAPS stands for Chicago Alternative Policing Strategy, and you might know it better as just community policing, incidentally, the program that the SROs come out of. And the way it works is that each district is divided into beats, and each beat meets once a month, and the police officers who serve in that area come, and residents may come and talk about their concerns or their ideas or hear what the police is doing or whatever. Well, the police really push this theme of we want you to define the quality of life issues in your community. So right away, that creates questions, right? Quality of life for whom? Who gets to define that? Well, in the beat that Kappelman was living in before he was alderman, that's the beat the other side of Broadway, beat 2311. It was the rich white homeowners that flocked en masse to these CAPS meetings. And why was that? Well, because in their viciousness and racism, they pretty much drove everybody else away from the meetings because it was just too hard to listen to that and feel those threats. And how did they define quality of life? Well, for example, they said that it was a problem if people were drinking on the public way or sleeping on city benches. So they used that as a way to criminalize homelessness. It was a problem if people were loitering. So they used that as a way to go after youth, especially Black youth. It was a problem if a particular building or apartment was too noisy or had too much traffic. And they used that as a way to go after residents of subsidized housing. And so at every meeting, they would have some buildings that they would talk about the extreme problems and what they were going to do about it. And basically what they were going to do is steady call police. And the police would steady come, even if no matter what the results of their call, that nothing happened, they would just come time after time. I want to give you some specific examples because this isn't just a vague thing that I'm, making up. So for example, a family that I knew that I was pretty close to lived in a scattered site on Magnolia, and the neighbors were steady calling on them because teenagers lived in the house, and you know how horrible teenagers are. The police would come almost daily and pound on their door and curse and threaten them. And eventually this mom felt like, I got to get my kids out of here. They're under attack. I don't know what's going to happen. To keep them safe, I have to leave Uptown. And she was the kind of person that you really want in your community, involved, positive thinking, full of ideas, but there she was gone. There was a building, 4707 Beacon. It was owned by a family that was fairly poor themselves, actually, and they kept the rents real low, so a lot of very low-income families lived there. And the white homeowners that lived on that block and around it, so this is not only Kappelman, but kind of his crew, they didn't want that building there, because after all, it was bringing down their home values, right? And nothing is more important than their right to make money. So their strategy was to call and make complaints on the building. I see people going in and out the back door at all hours. I keep seeing this guy putting something in a car in the alley, like all kinds of stories, right? And so the police would come every single time that they would make these calls. And what that does is that creates a record. And that record kicks things up to the nuisance abatement task force. And then that triggers the building inspectors, and they come out to check out the building. Well, every building in Uptown, practically all the old ones, is full of building violations, and definitely this one was. The family was low income and couldn't really fix things. They were just trying to provide housing to poor families. So, of course, they could not fix all the building violations, and so basically they were harassed out of the community. They sold to a developer. And there was no criminal activity. It was all made up. In fact, that's the strategy of the police, and I have heard them say this at CAPS meetings. When people say, well, I don't like these kids hanging out in front of my building, the police will say, well, they're on public property. There's nothing we can really do. But if you call and say you see suspicious activity, then we can come. So basically, they were telling these rich homeowners, just lie. Just say you see a drug deal or you see whatever, and we'll come and we'll roust them. And while we're at it, we'll fill out contact cards on them so we can start building a record on these young people and eventually create a way to move them out of the neighborhood also. They use similar pressure on some of the large buildings in the community that are subsidized, the HUD buildings. So at 920 Lakeside, for example, they pressured the management into instituting a policy where any family member who had had any sort of run-ins with the law was banned from the property. So if your mom was sick and needed groceries, but you had some kind of legal record, no, sorry, you can't deliver her groceries. If your grandma who lives on the 7th floor was dying, sorry, no, you can't go visit her. So in doing this, they were separating families and again, putting pressure on people to feel like, why am I staying here? I can't even have my family members come visit me. His husband, Richard Thale, is maybe a more horrible human being than he is, if that is possible. He had something called the Court Advocacy Committee, and this is an invention by the police department that is just horrific. It basically gets people in the community to go to court and stand up and basically pressure the judge to issue a harsher sentence. But Richard Thale took it one step further, and he recruited people, including people who didn't live anywhere near the property in question. He recruited them to come to housing court, not criminal court, housing court, to try to pressure judges to evict people. That's how they keep using the police and the prison industrial complex for their ends. Now, all of these are things he was doing before he was even elected. Since he's been alderman, he's certainly done plenty, and I'm just going to talk real briefly about how he has continuously targeted homeless people, because he seems to especially hate them, no matter what his Facebook pages may say. So there's an ordinance that gives people the right to be on public property and to sleep on public property because, you know, you're not supposed to criminalize homelessness. But the police routinely violate that ordinance. They ticket people, they harass people, they take their stuff and throw it away. They would get the cleaner people to come in, and folks would have to move all their stuff away. If they had to work that day, too bad. You'd have to be there, move your stuff, guard it until you could move it back in. Kappelman will claim, oh no, I never called the police. And, maybe we don't have a record of the calls, but he never stood up for them either. He was all about letting that go on. He actively recruited the police to evict Uptown Tent City a few years back when they were doing all the construction. And a lot of people went over there to the public property by Stewart School, what's now the Stewart School Lofts. And he got the police to evict them from there. And then he got the developer to put a fence around it. So basically, Kappelman, he would be a racist gentrifier without the police, and the police would be a white supremacist gang of oppressors without Kappelman. They certainly were before he was the alderman, but working together and with the housing developer or the private developers, they are really working hard to make this into a much wealthier and wider community. So our task is super clear, never been clearer, right? We have to defund police and we have to get rid of Kappelman, because neither is going to change.
Thank you so much for that, Karen. Our next speaker is Owaida from the Palestinian Youth Movement, who's going to talk to us about the need for joint solidarity.
Nice. I want you to repeat after me real quick. I am smart. I am tough. I will always be enough. And 12. Nice. So, as it was mentioned, my name is Owaida. I'm a member of Palestinian Youth Movement, PYM for short. We are a grassroots organization doing joint solidarity work around the world. And I am also a part of the Joint Solidarity Committee in PYM, so that's why I'm here today. I want to start off by sharing a quick story about my uncle. For those who don't know, I was born and raised in Palestine for a few years, and I fled Palestine with my mother at the age of 5. My mom was 25 because the Second Intifada, which was basically the largest revolution that took place in Palestine against Israeli occupation. Promise I'm going somewhere with this. The earliest memory I have of Palestine was being 5 years old and my mom holding my hand, and we were walking through Ramallah, which is one of the largest cities in Palestine. And I remember pointing at an Israeli tank. Mind you, everything around us was kind of like destroyed and rubble because the war had taken its toll at this point. And I remember being like, "Mama, what's that?" And I remember my mom quickly putting my hand down and telling me not to point at the tank. And she picked me up and she ran away. And that's the earliest memory I have of Palestine. My uncle, so I'm 24, so this was around 2000 or 2001. My uncle was arrested by the Israeli military for armed resistance. He was fighting to kick settlers off the land that they stole from my people. Under international law, armed resistance, and according to the United Nations, armed resistance is legal. Occupied people have the right to resist by any means necessary. So my uncle was legally allowed to defend himself in court. When the Israeli soldiers arrested him and put him on an Israeli warplane, his body never made it back to Tel Aviv, which is an Israeli city. Instead, he was brutally tortured and eventually murdered on this warplane. Not only that, and trigger warning for anyone, his body was dismembered, chopped up into pieces, and when the Israeli warplane flew over my family's home, they threw the pieces of his body over my family's house for my aunts and uncles and cousins to pick up. Those same soldiers are the soldiers that train our police. The Israeli military trains racist US police. LAPD, CPD, and NYPD. Is that right? That ain't right. Say that ain't right. Our relationship with the Israeli military is so insidious that there's actually an NYPD office in Tel Aviv. So you can actually be arrested by New York police in a foreign country. I wanted to share that story of my uncle to lay the groundwork of the relationship between our oppressors. And I wanted to speak to the relationship that we have with each other through joint solidarity. Our cities in America look this way because of the war on terror, and because the war on terror has been brought home to our inner cities. Our cities look this way because our government and our military tested and perfected tear gas and oppressive tactics on Arabs. 2020 is not an isolated year. For those of us who have been living under the boot of US violence, this has always been our lives. Israel is an extension of US violence, operating as a white settlement on Arab land. Our police and the Israeli military exist to protect property like McDonald's and Starbucks, which are leeching off our communities and preying on vulnerable people, leaving us in a state of exploitation. Flint, Michigan doesn't have water, but the USA can funnel billions of dollars to the Israeli military while they steal water from indigenous Palestinians. I wanna quote Ahed Tamimi. Ahed Tamimi was the 16, 17-year-old Palestinian girl. She was arrested by Israeli soldiers because at 3 a.m., Israeli soldiers went into her village, shot her cousin at point blank range. And what did she do? She went up to the Israeli soldier and she slapped him in the face for doing that to her cousin. She was then taken to military court and essentially sent to prison. When the judge tried her and sentenced her to prison, she said one thing. When all of these journalists were like flooding her, they wanted commentary, they wanted to see what she said. She said, "There is no justice under occupation. There can never be justice under occupation." And so that makes me think about the land that we're on today, the land that we're standing on right now, you and I, and all across this land. It is occupied indigenous land. It is stolen indigenous land. And there can never be justice in this system so long as the police and so long as electoral politics exist to uphold the status quo. But I want to share my vision of what justice looks like on this land and in Palestine. Justice looks like reparations, first and foremost. Reparations for Black people, reparations for indigenous people, reparations for Palestinians, for bearing the brunt of ethnic cleansing, genocide, and crimes against humanity, whether it be a Democratic president or a Republican president. The police is the tool of the wealthy elites, period. A second form of justice that looks like to me is not only reparations, but repatriation. That means repatriation of this land. This land needs to be given back to the people that it belongs to the indigenous people and to the Black folks that built these cities before you gentrified them the out, Alderman Kappelman. I'm sorry if I curse a lot, but I also want to say I value political vulgarity. I think it's really important. Another thing, the third point that I want to make, a form of justice, whether it be transformative or restorative, is abolishing the police and abolishing prisons. It's so interesting. Whenever you want to say abolish the police, you always get the feeling, well, who are you going to call when someone robs you? Well, don't call the police if you want to abolish them. I think that we've all shown each other within the last few months that we don't need the fucking police, because who takes care of us? We take care of us. We've literally proven that to ourselves within these last few months. We have literally shown up for each other these last few months. So the next time someone tries to fucking rob me, I'm not gonna call the police. I never would have called the police. Do you know who I call? I call my chosen family. I call the fucking leftists and the communists that the media tries to tell me are fucking fools and thieves. We're not the thieves. We're actually the vanguards of a movement that's trying to redistribute resources to people that are robbed of those resources. Those are the people that I'm gonna fucking call when something happens to me. Not those pigs over there who would actually probably show up and make the scene worse and probably fucking kill me or shoot me. Like, I'm not gonna call the cops. And so the other point that they always bring up is abolish prisons. Well, what are we gonna do with rapists? Well, what if I told you that with prisons, we're actually creating the conditions that cause sexual assault? In our society, the largest percentage of sexual assault takes place in prisons because our tax money is funding that. We are creating spaces that are causing people to resort to sexual assault. So I don't want to hear the next time somebody tells me about abolishing prisons or the police. There's your 2 points. Have a great day. That means the next time somebody makes a bad decision, you don't police them for making that bad decision. Do we want to be the police? When we get rid of CPD, when we get rid of all of the police, do we want to be the new police? No. Policing is a form of violence, and violence cannot be reformed. Please say that with me. Policing is a form of violence, and you cannot reform violence. So does that mean we can reform CPD? But does that mean that we can enforce a form of abolition through CPAC? So we want CPAC, right? We want to hold CPD accountable. Right. I spoke at the Pride March about a month ago, 2 months ago, and I spoke about a reimagined world. And in the words and in the energy of Angela Davis, Alice Walker, Assata Shakur, and our comrade Assata, who spoke before me, I spoke about how all I wanted for my birthday was collective liberation. And collective liberation won't come without Black liberation. All I want is to live in a world where my friends can live loud, Black, brown, radical lives without living in fear. A world where we no longer need mutual aid because none of us are hungry or unhoused, because all of that money is going to our communities, not to the police. I want to live in a world where primarily white men aren't allowed to hoard wealth through exploitive labor practices, extracting resources from our earth or any other means. I want to live in a world where we talk about white supremacy like we talk about the dinosaurs, extinct and difficult for us to imagine what it was truly like. But actually, I don't even want white supremacy's fossils. I want to live in a world where white supremacy has rotted, disintegrated, left our lives in imaginations. I want to live in a world that looks like my friendships and my chosen family, a world that is loving, a world that is challenging, a world that is kind, and a world that is already on its way. So let me tell you something. My 24th birthday, it wasn't a happy birthday because I didn't get my wish. Just like the many of us, the rest of us. I know we don't always get what we want. My wish remains unfulfilled like the dreams of many. Till they are, I take Angela Davis's words seriously. We have to act as if it were possible to radically transform the world, and you have to do it all the time. I am so grateful for the people in the 24 years of my life who have pushed me to live and act in this way. And that includes brown and Black women, primarily. Every single one of you here is a blessing to me. Another world is possible, probable, and on her way. And I want to wrap it up by saying one last thing. Well, a few last things. Black Lives Matter also applies when Black people are alive. It means you support their work. It means you see them for who they are, everything they are, and everything they deserve. And that means we deserve that reimagined world, and that means you are going to work for that world. It means buying their art, streaming their music. It means you put your body between their body and a cop. Assata Shakur said this quote from prison. She was in a very low point in her life. She was abused, assaulted by police officers, and from that despair, she pulled out one of the most beautiful quotes. And I want you all to repeat it after me. It is our duty to fight for our freedom. That's the energy I need right now. It is our duty to fight for our freedom. It is our duty to win. We must love each other and support each other. We have nothing to lose but our chains. We have nothing to lose but our chains. Close your eyes for me real quick. I want you to visualize a reimagined world where black people can be black, where trans people can be trans, and people can identify as whatever gender they feel, where women can wear whatever the fuck they want to wear, where queer people get to have whatever color hair they want to have, where a cop isn't on every corner of our community policing people for the choices they make. We can live in that world. Do you want to fight for that world? Yes. Do you want to fight for it with me? Yes. I want you to leave today constantly reimagining what this world could look like. We need you to get these cops off our streets. We need you to support CPAC. Ashe. Thank you so much.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to need us to give it up one more time for Samer, Assata, and Karen. Really make some noise. That was amazing. And something that all of them talked about is reimagining our future. Sorry, I forgot to say, I'm Nikta. I'm from 46 Ward Neighbors Against Police Violence. Thank you all for being here today. Yes, we're here for CPAC, but not for CPAC's sake, right? To get to that future that we imagine. And Kappelman is 100% a brick, a tiny, 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 tiny brick, but a brick nonetheless, in that wall, right? So we have to take what we learned today and lift our voices and take action. And so what my role here is today, because I am not gifted enough to speak the way that our speakers have gifted us with, is to ask you to take that action and to guide you to that action. So things you can do right now in this moment are sign the green postcards that I've seen a lot of you sign, so thank you very much. If you have not, those postcards will go directly to the alderman. If you don't live in this ward, that's okay. You still support CPAC, we will get those postcards to your alderman. So building that record, right? Super important. If you want to get more involved with the 46 ward neighbors, you can. There's a sign-up sheet for that. We'll get you on our listserv. That's going to take you into tomorrow, into next month, into next year to make sure that you're still part of this fight. So please do that. And I will say most importantly, a thing that we know about James Kappelman, we know a lot about James Kappelman. One of the things that we know is that he is allergic to public true discourse, which is why he is not here today. We have invited him, we sent him multiple emails, and he tore down our posters. His husband, he's a coward, his husband tore down our posters. But we're not gonna be quiet. And we know that he does listen to his tweets. He is hyper aware of what's going on Facebook, because it's all about that veneer for him. It's all about that fakeness and those lies. So I want everyone to take their phone out right now, get on Twitter. I think Twitter really makes him itch, so I feel like that's a good one. Get on Facebook, wherever you want to go. He's at James Kappelman. He should be easy to find. If you can't find him, go to our info table. We will get your phone to the right place. And I want you to tell him what you imagine that CPAC will allow us. What is the future that we're fighting for? Because he does get it, but he needs to hear it. He needs to hear why we're fighting and that we're not gonna stop, because we're fighting for our future. So everyone take your phones out. I see some people doing it. I don't see everybody doing it. I'm gonna be a little bossy. Please get your phone out. Get on Twitter, @James Kappelman. And whatever you write, just tag it CPAC Now, That'll make our voices more collective. That's all I have to say. Thank you. I'm sorry, I'm also supposed to introduce the next speaker. So our next speaker is Kayla Freeman. She is a member of 46 Ward Neighbors Against Police Violence, and she's also a social worker in the ward, and she's gonna share her experiences with us. So give it up for Kayla.
Hi everyone, thank you for coming out here. Hello, someone waved, wonderful. I am so glad that Sammer mentioned land acknowledgement. I just want us to take a moment to say the names of the tribes: Kickapoo, Peoria, Potawatomi, Miami, and Sioux. This is their land. And why is it so important that we acknowledge land? I personally believe that protest is exercising saying the truth in public. And so I want to practice saying the truth today about the police impact of people with mental illness. I'm a social worker who works with people struggling with addiction and mental illness. I'm completing a field placement working in rehab right now, and I cannot serve clients and help them recover without reflecting on the person in environment. That's a social work truism. We look at the person in environment. So I can't look at a person without acknowledging their trauma and their histories, often filled with violence, that have led to the emotional and behavioral symptoms that we call mental illness, or we call an addiction. Medical literature shows us that trauma and addiction changes the brain. It is a physical disease as much as diabetes. So in the same way that you can't self-love your pancreas into working better, you can't self-discipline your tumors into shrinking, mental illness is a very real and very physical medical illness that cannot be changed or coerced or shamed out of existence, and it certainly cannot be forced via police violence into receding. The city of Chicago currently has a plan in place for dealing with calls for and from people struggling with a mental health crisis. This is called their Crisis Intervention Team Training. And when you request a CIT team, they deploy these responders to the scene. However, these are not psychologists and social workers, therapists, and experts dispatched. They are just police officers with 40 hours of crisis training. To give you some perspective, I will be completing 1,000 hours of mental health training by the time I achieve licensure in May. After that, I will have to go through 3,000 more hours before I can practice independently without a supervisor. So 40 hours of mental health training is not enough to run a support group, much less address a crisis with life and death stakes. Additionally, because CIT training is optional, police officers, very few of them have completed it. So, if a person calls and requests a CIT team for a mental health emergency, there is a coin flips chance that you will actually get a CIT team dispatched to your crisis. Imagine if you called an ambulance and there was a coin flips chance that instead of paramedics, they sent lifeguards. And imagine these lifeguards have guns, and if your broken leg or your heart attack gets too scary, they might shoot you and kill you. Individuals with severe mental illness make up about 2% of the United States population, but they make up a little more than a third of all police interactions. On top of that, a person struggling with mental illness is 16 times more likely to be killed by the police during that interaction than their healthier peers. And imagine you are a mentally ill person who is also Black or brown or visibly queer. The rates of your mortality have just skyrocketed. It is not my opinion. nor my political stance that policing is violent and broken. It is a fact. Scientific evidence demonstrates policing provides a greater public health risk to vulnerable communities than it does any sort of benefit. There is a line in the Police Code of Ethics asserting that officers must protect and serve. If any other profession, including social workers, so egregiously violated their ethical code, the government would intervene immediately and ensure public safety. We are here today because there has been no intervention for far too long. We are here to advocate for a community and civilian police accountability council for CPAC, because CPAC would create a dialogue that includes the very voices that are most impacted by police violence. It would include voices on this council, people with clinical expertise, people with lived experience of police violence or mental illness or growing up in traumatic situations, often due to neighborhoods that are heavily policed. It is illogical that right now these people have no say in what is supposedly a public service for their benefit. With community impact via CPAC, we can expand CIT training, make it mandatory for all officers. We can advocate for social workers to become first responders instead. With CPAC, we can begin to deconstruct a violent system. We can defund it, we can tear it down, and we can imagine a future that is safer for all of us. Because when we truly serve and protect our most vulnerable neighbors, we serve and protect us all. Thank you.
Thank you, Kayla, for that perspective. It's great to hear from a social worker because we know Kappelman likes to lean on that. So that was really great. Next up, we have Carmen and their comrades from the Brown Berets, which is a civil rights group based in the Chicano movement.
Hey everybody. Wow, that's loud. Woo. Let's see, notes app. Okay. So first I'm going to start off with a mission statement. The Brown Berets are comprised of raza of all ages, committed to the founding principles and ideals of the Chicano movement. Over the years, we have opened our ranks to all Latinx people and to the indigenous people of Turtle Island. We are dedicating to preserving the past, protecting the present, and creating a future throughout Aztlán. We are a grassroots organization in its truest form, not limited by political ideology or bound by borders. A few of our carnales y carnals are not here today because they are supporting La Raza in the Chicano National Day of Action, Resistance, Anti-Sexism, and Anti-Fascism in Los Angeles. But they send their support, and we are here to stand in solidarity with Black Lives, Jacob Blake, and the protesters in Kenosha. Viva la Casa. So, I wasn't smart enough to have written a speech beforehand, so here we go, off the fly. So, truly, the reason that we come together in Chicago, also in this neighborhood, that none of us are a part of, but all of us grew up in the Chicagoland area, in Chicago. I've spent a lot of time in Uptown. As a young person, I saw how this neighborhood was a black and brown neighborhood before gentrification got its greedy claws into the many beautiful neighborhoods of our city. I think it's important as a Latinx person to at all times be anti-black, pro-blackness, reel that on back, and stand with all of our siblings of color and in our indigenous land. So today I've heard a lot about what it means to envision a new future, and what it means to envision a future without the police department, without the pigs as we like to call them, and what that can truly look like within liberation of Black people and people indigenous of this nation. And what I truly see as it's all of us standing together for one another. As we've heard in our marches, as we've heard in our protests, who keeps us safe? We keep us safe. Who keeps us safe? Who keeps us safe?
We keep us safe.
Yeah, that's right. And it really, really, really is true. When we look at our teachers for our young people, keeping our students safe, who keeps us safe? The police department in our schools do not keep us safe, they keep us scared. Is fear and safety the same thing? I don't think so. Who keeps us safe when we go into the emergency room? Not insurance companies, not people looking to deport us, not people looking to charge us, not people looking to check our pockets and see what kind of drugs they've planted on us. That's not the point. Who keeps us safe in that situation? We keep us safe. What do those people look like? They look like nurses, they look like doctors, they look like nurse practitioners, they look like our EMTs, alive or dead. They look like us. They don't look like them. Why do they come in riot gear? Who are they here to serve and protect? Not us. Within envisioning a new future, I see that as many steps. We see that as finding justice for our people. We see that as the defunding and reallocating of funds. We see that as a future without a prison system, without an unjust system. We see a future where we're not voting for the lesser of two evils. We're seeing a system in which we can flourish and not just the highest percent of us. And we think about as where's our lovely speaker? I think they might have left. But as one of our speakers beforehand talked about restorative justice and what that means within the incarceration system and the unjust system that we've created, that was created for us, we think about the people who are victims of violent crimes, who are victims of violent crimes as children, what systemic racism, what institutionalized punishment looks like, and what that continues to create within our communities. It makes the person who was abused as a child and never seen support, it puts them into a position that oftentimes perpetuates that cycle of abuse in a way that doesn't need to happen, in a way that our folks who are social workers, our folks who are here for social justice, our folks that are here to stop gentrification, we don't need to continue to punish ourselves and to punish one another. Also, for the color of our skins, there's how many white folks are here tonight? A lot of white folks are here tonight. What does solidarity look like within class struggle? What does solidarity look like within needing homes and needing safe drinking water and needing spaces to experience joy and not be policed until we are killed? One more point to bring up is we're all aware that on September 15th, there's the Police Training Academy for ICE. That's a day that we all need to keep us safe. They don't keep us safe. They want us gone. They want to prey on the people who can never receive medical treatment, whether they tax pay, which they do, or do not. The system is just so broken. So we expect to see everybody within this community show up for and with us, both us folks who are of our border to the south, and our folks who are from Africa, our folks who are from Arab nations. They're looking for all of us, and they can deport and single out anyone that looks different, whether visibly queer, as we said earlier, whether black, brown, differently abled, poor, We all have a target on our back, and I think that all we need to do is stick up for one another and protest and march on the line in armed resistance and unarmed resistance and community support and just personal support. Thank you.
I'm not sure I believe you didn't write any of that ahead of time. That was wonderful. Round of applause again for Carmen. Our next speaker is Fox, who is an activist with the Uptown tent city, which had a struggle against the forces of gentrification right here in this spot that they're going to talk about a little bit.
Hello. Thank you all for being here today. I want to start with a poem that I wrote. I want you to repeat after me. Racist killings only stop.
Racist killings only stop.
When we take the guns from cops.
When we take the guns from cops.
Racist killings only stop.
Racist killings only stop.
When we take the funds from cops.
When we take the funds from cops.
Racist killings only stop. When we take the guns from cops.
Racist killings only stop. When we take the guns from cops.
Racist killings only stop. When we take the funds from cops.
Killings only stop when we take the funds.
12. Nice. Hell yes. Yes. Beautiful. My name is Fox. I used to live in that building right there. But due to COVID and the gentrification process happening in Uptown, I was priced out of this neighborhood. Just down the street from here, you'll see a tent city. This is the third tent city I've seen since I moved here 5 or 6 years ago. There's another one down on Lawrence. A few years ago, I joined Uptown Tent City because the city issued an eviction notice to people living under a bridge. That ain't right. That's fucked up. We moved that encampment 5 times in 4 days. We moved them onto that grass over there. We moved them onto the grass over there. We moved them onto the grass over there. And we moved them on the grass right here. I want to build on all of the conversation we've had about who this land belongs to and say that the people who slept here had their tents taken away from them by police and city sanitation workers. That's up. That's murder. Alderman Kappelman didn't show up here for them. We did. Alderman Kappelman doesn't show up to his office hours. He runs away and hides because he's a stupid little bitch. He's a fucking coward. You showed up here today because you are brave. You showed up here today because you are brave. We have seen cops kill so many people with impunity. They get away with it all the time. And that's because they're protecting the manifest death toll to the foundation of this fake country. America is a fake country. Israel is a fake country. Australia is a fake country. And they can only exist with regulated violence against brown and black people. They cannot do that without prisons. They cannot do that unless they can kill you with impunity. Abolish police. Reallocate those funds to schools, to housing, to real social networks that feed people, that house people. They are afraid of organizations who do the work they're supposed to do. So when the Black Panthers were feeding people, who did they target? They killed Fred Hampton. You cannot reform violence. America is a death cult. People tell me, oh, you've got to vote for Joe Biden and we can push these policies to the left. But when Obama was in office, You've got Standing Rock. You've got Black Lives Matter protests popping up all over the place. It is not enough to vote. You need to show up. Get off the internet, come out here and join us if you're watching this. We can't do this unless we all show up. Ariel Atkins from Black Lives Matter always says, find your movement home. There are plenty of organizations here. Get involved. Talk to these people with the yellow shirts. Talk to CPAC people. There are so many organizations that you can join so that you can do the work that people call police to do. CPAC now. CPAC now. Alderman Kappelman, resign. I want to say one more thing, but first I need to take a deep breath because I don't normally speak in public. You are all so beautiful. Thank you for letting me speak here. 12. Racist killings only stop when we take the guns from cops. Racist killings only stop when we take the guns from cops. Thank you.
When we put this program together, I did not think about how hard it would be to get up here with housekeeping after these types of speeches. So I apologize to myself, I think, for that. I want to take some more time and make sure that we give, I'm talking a huge round of applause. I'm talking crazy warmth for Fox, Carmen and the Brown Berets, and Kayla. Like, show them how much love you have. Give me more. Come on. Yeah. Nice. Awesome. Thanks, guys. Yeah, that's what I wanted. Okay. Fox talked about getting involved, and I know everyone wants to. Everyone is going to find a different way to do that. We've talked about how you can do that here. Sign those postcards. That's real. That is how the Chicago Alliance Against Racial and Political Repression has kept this movement going, has proven that there are over 60,000 people in this city dedicated to this fight. So I know sometimes it seems like signing a petition, signing a postcard, it's just something I do when I walk away. What does it mean? It really means a lot. And I know it goes without saying, but those 60,000, they're 60,000 individual humans, right? So you do have that power. We're all here today collectively sort of reveling in our power. These speakers have been so powerful. So, take that momentum and really turn it into action. So additional ways that you can do that are by finding some of or all of our endorsers and sponsors and co-hosts. We've created a resource page on our Facebook page. Actually, if you go to the Facebook page for this event, you can find it. If you sign up for our newsletter, we will get it to you. If none of those are accessible to you, come talk to me or anybody at the table and we will get that information to you because it's so crucial, right? Coming here today is power and then there's action, right? So let's make sure we keep it going. I'm gonna let you know who those folks are that are listed on our resource sheet. So of course, this was hosted by the 46 Ward Neighbors Against Police Violence. We have a form there that you can fill out if you want to get more involved. This is co-hosted by Carper, who has been leading this effort. And we're going to have a speaker from that organization later on. This is co-sponsored or co-endorsed by Black Lives Matter, 48th Ward Neighbors for Justice, the National Asian Pacific American Women's Forum, Northside Action for Justice. Those are the folks in the yellow shirts. Palestinian Youth Movement, and of course the Brown Berets. So check out that resource page. We also have some merch for sale at the table if you want to really show that off. We have shirts, I think, so you can talk to the folks up there about that. And if you want to continue to get under Kappelman's skin, I again cannot stress the importance of showing up in his social media, showing up in his office hours, calling his office, emailing him. I will say, you know, we don't get a lot of change by asking nicely, so take that for what it's worth, and really listen to his responses to get a feel for where he's coming from. But this is not something that you do once. It is not something that you do twice. This is something that you do every week, every day. You ask your friends to do it. You expand your network, and that's how we're going to win. Okay, I think that's all I had for that section. So now I'm going to introduce Scott Jarvis, who's also a member of the 46 Ward Neighbors Against Police Violence, and he's going to give some very specific details about police in our ward that our group did research on, so we can get even more fired up about how fucking cool they are. Give it up for Scott.
Hi, everybody. First of all, my name is Scott Jarvis with the 46 Ward Neighbors. I want a big thank you to Elisa for compiling this information. This is sourced from the Citizens Police Data Project and Settling for Misconduct. So something that Kappelman does a lot, he likes to act like police violence or bad police are an issue on the south side or the west side. He's like, no, we only have good cops in Uptown. There's a lot wrong with that, namely, there's no such thing as a good cop. So this is some of, let's call them the greatest hits of, these are some of the cops that are allegedly protecting us here in the 46th Ward and Uptown in general. So we have, first on the list, Bradley Hespy, badge number 15218. In December 2000, Lee Thompson died from asphyxia due to a chokehold, and Hespy admitted to placing his arms around Thompson's neck. A jury found him not guilty. 12 years later, Hespy was suspended for 5 days due to corruption charges. You'll not be surprised to learn he remains an officer in the 46th Ward. George Panathiakis, badge number 11494. In 2015, a case of excessive force to a minor against Panathiakis and another officer cost the city $10,000. He has received a use of force complaint almost every year of his career. This is more than 90% of other officers. Again, still in our ward. Next up, we have Nenad Markovic, badge number 19638. Markovic has 89 allegations, 14 in this ward alone. That is more than 99.8% of other officers. Despite being suspended for a total of 374 days, Markovic has been given 51 honorable mentions, more than 86% of other officers. So not only is he one of the worst, he's also rewarded some of the most. And I just want some of you who work, can you imagine having a job where you can be suspended 374 days, suspended, and then you come back and get accolades? Wild. These are the cops in our ward, the alleged good cops. And the last I have on my list, Reuben Weber, badge number 21072. In 2011, Weber was among 6 detectives who fabricated evidence, withheld essential information, and coerced the false confession of 18-year-old Marcel Brown. Brown spent nearly a decade in prison before being exonerated. And again, Weber remains an active detective in the 46th Ward. So this is why we're out here calling for CPAC now. We demand accountability for these cops that are allegedly protecting us. So, CPAC now. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Scott. Our next speaker has been an Uptown resident for over 30 years, co-founder of the Gay Liberation Movement, has worked in anti-police violence work, anti-war work, and to help protect the homeless. And most importantly, I want you all to give him an extra round of applause. He's been our sound guy all day today, so every word you've heard online or out here is because Andy Thayer set us up right. So come on up and speak.
Thank you. I don't know about a lot of you, but I've been profoundly depressed and angry at the same time for the last several days. I don't think you could be human without being so. So I'd like to start out my remarks with a portion of what the sister Jacob Blake said 3 days ago. Quote, yeah, that's okay. So many people have reached out to me. Her words are so powerful, I want you to really, really hear them. So many people have reached out to me, telling me they're sorry that this happened to my family. Well, don't be sorry, because this has been happening to my family for a long time, longer than I can account for. It happened to Emmett Till. Emmett Till is my family. Philando, Mike Brown, Sandra, this has been happening to my family. This is nothing new. I'm not sad. I'm not sorry. I'm angry and I'm tired. I haven't cried one time. I stopped crying years ago. I am numb. I have been watching police murder people who look like me for years. I'm also a Black History minor, so not only have I been watching it happening in the 30 years that I've been on this planet, but I've been watching it for years before I've been alive. I'm not sad. I don't want your pity. I want change. And you look at all the cities around this country that have gotten change in terms of at least the damn cops being fired, at least the cops being charged with criminal charges. And what have we seen out of Mayor Lightfoot and her hand-picked in the back pocket aldermen like James Kappelman? We've got nothing. We've got no change. And that's got to stop. Now, in response to Kenosha, in response to the looting on Michigan Avenue and elsewhere, we've heard a lot of talk about violence. A lot of talk about violence. And I'd like to just quote something that Malcolm X said in response to the assassination of John F. Kennedy in 1963. He said, "The chickens have come home to roost." And by that, he was talking about Kennedy's war on Vietnam, his orchestrating the assassination of President Diem, his orchestrating several attempted assassinations on President Castro. Here you had a man who, in the later words of Martin Luther King, said, "The United States is the biggest purveyor of violence in the world today," and yet they're saying, violence is not the way to make change. We live in a country where half of the federal discretionary budget goes to the military. We live in a city where 40% of the operational budget goes to the CPD. And you're telling us that violence makes no difference? It's not the way to make change? Well, look in the damn mirror, Mayor Lightfoot. Look in the damn mirror, every damn president, including whoever the hell gets elected in November. Now, violence takes many forms. As Fox mentioned, a number of us, and I'm sure a number of you out here, were involved a few years ago in trying to protect our community's homeless population from being evicted repeatedly by Alderman Kappelman and the police and the social workers employed by the Chicago Department of Health and a small army, frankly, of people from everything from streets and San on up to the Chicago Law Department. We followed their rules. We filed lawsuits. We were defeated. As Fox mentioned, we were evicted 5 times, including from this very ground right here. They brought out the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District cop, a cop who had arrested me like 5 years before that. He's now retired and working for them. 5 years ago, they attempted to shut down a homeless protest right over here on this corner here. And we used the law to temporarily let us have that space. But then just a few years later, when Kappelman pushed us out due to the alleged need to fix the viaduct over here, we filed federal lawsuit. We lost. We filed suit to be over here in the then vacant Stewart Mall area next to the closed down school, a school that was, of course, closed down with the help of Alderman Kappelman and then Mayor Rahm Emanuel. And we lost. And they wonder why people, after protesting, after saying Black Lives Matter so many f***ing times, that people resort to violence. They've got only themselves to blame. Only themselves to blame. And they're going to be dishing out more violence, not just against protesters and not just cops with a gun, but in a few months' time, many of the people over here and over at the Lawrence Viaduct, they're going to need a place to stay. And in the era of COVID and pandemics, they cannot be staying in shelters where you're literally just a couple feet next to a complete stranger. That's the only reason why Kappelman has allowed these newborn tent cities to be here, because he knows that none of the shelters can have them right now. But in a couple of months' time, we're going to have the cold weather. And Mayor Lightfoot, no doubt, will wash your hands and say, oh, what can we do? Because you know, a lot of folks, they'll go on the L's, but then that isn't safe either. Well, we've got a lot of empty hotels in this city, and we need to demand that they be opened up for every single homeless person who needs a roof over their head. And more than that, look at all these heated, vacant storefronts that we've got in this city. A real estate pal of mine told me the reason why a lot of those storefronts is empty is they get a tax break. It's actually cheap, it's more lucrative to keep the storefront vacant rather than rent it out at cost to some small business. And so what it comes down to is money. And this sick capitalist system we've got. And what is the role of the police, the aldermen, and the mayor and all that? It's to keep the damn status quo so the real estate developers can make money off of our backs. And part of the way they do that is by, of course, destroying public housing, because public housing is competition. You have lots of public housing. They can't charge the enormous rents they do. And that's why they've destroyed public housing in this community. That's why they've destroyed the SROs in this community and around the city. We need to say, Mayor Lightfoot, Alderman Kappelman, no, profits will not come before people. Open up those goddamn hotels for the homeless this fall so people don't literally die on our streets. If they do die, we hold you directly responsible for that death. And if you think there's violence and anger right now, just keep on doing what you're doing.
Andy. Our next speaker has worn many hats in her life. She's an organizer. She was a former candidate for alderwoman. She's a new mother. But when I asked how she wants to be introduced, she just said, at the end of the day, I'm just a really radical-ass neighbor that wants to live in a place where I'm safe and my neighbors are safe. Everybody give it up for Angela Clay.
Peace, 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 peace. Before we get started, I just want to have a few moments of silence so that we can acknowledge the families of Breonna Taylor and Elijah McClain. When I was approached to come and speak, it's not unusual for me to be at these things because I've been at rallies like this since the babies you've seen running behind all of the speakers that we've had. My grandmother was a Irish and German short little old lady who migrated to the North Side Uptown community because of resources. She didn't have an eighth grade degree. She was a single mother at the time, and the ward that welcomed her was the ward that we're all residing in now. That is my struggle. That is my story. I am a product of this land that you stand on. I'm a product of this park that we are in right now. I am a product of the high school that's just a few feet away from us. I am a product of all of the struggles that you've heard here today. And we've come home to roost. I know that this is about CPAC, and it's truly needed. If you have any morals, you do understand that we have to have some type of accountability for our police officers. But that's not it. I say this because our police officers are responding, but we are not being on the preventative side. When we have police show up to disagreements, altercations, because usually they're within social circles. Usually the people who have beefs, as we call it, know each other. When they show up, the problem gets escalated to the 10th degree, and the root of why they were called is never addressed in the first place. So when we think about who we need, it's truly we protect us. If there were anything to ever happen to me, I would rather call 5 of you sitting on this grass than to ever call 911. I don't know if I've ever shared this story publicly, but I was just thinking about what I would speak to today. And it was a lot of the things that we as people of color do is we decompress our trauma. We have been taught to hide our scars. We have been taught to not talk about our problems. A few years ago, it was Valentine's Day, and my partner and I, in true fashion, were late for reservations downtown. I lived right here on Hazel, so we were speed walking down Sunnyside to Broadway, and we spotted a cab because we needed a cab. This was no Uber at the time. And we waved down the cab frantically. We hopped in the cab in front of Target. We turned down Montrose Avenue, and before we could get past the Jewels, there were 3 squad cars behind our cab telling us to get out. Now again, this is Valentine's Day, so I think we look a little cute. I thought we looked a little spiffy. But we were pulled out of the cabs. My partner was arrested and put into handcuffs. I was placed on the back of the car with my hands on the car and told that we had fit the description of 2 people who just committed a shooting. I am embarrassed. I am humiliated. I am frustrated. Nothing that I say can make these people with guns, because that's the only reason why we listen to them, is because they have guns. If there was ever any time where they didn't have guns, it would be a problem. Because our families, we're all taught to respect each other. When we were growing up, our families taught us, if somebody hits you, what do? You hit them back. But we can't do that because we are threatened under duress and force of a person who might have their own biases and their own racism. And they take it out on the person where they feel like they have the most power. I called my alderman's office at the time. I don't have to name who was in office at the time. Crying hysterically the next day, trying to tell them about my story. I got the runaround about go to this beat, talk to this division, go. Nothing ever happened. Nothing. To the point that it becomes a part of our conversations. When we are talking about our experiences, we mean our traumas. I share trauma from my father. I share trauma from my mother. I share trauma from my grandparents who were marching and rioting in the 60s next to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. when he came to Chicago to fight for affordable housing. I carry those traumas. And because we carry those traumas, we've never really unpacked them until 2020. I am so glad that all of you all are able. There's a difference between being able and willing. You are able to create change. You are able to use your voice and your position in this world to help your fellow neighbors. It's been 167 days since Breonna Taylor's murder. And Marie spoke. I recently became a mom, which is crazy because that's just like, what, a human? But when I was pregnant, if you all have never watched the Meek Mill documentary on Amazon, you are missing a crucial point of why young Black and brown people are so pissed off right now. I watched that movie when I was about 4 months pregnant, so I didn't know if I was having a girl or a boy yet. And I remember watching the series and bawling to my mother, saying, I pray that I don't have a son. I thought that I was okay when I found out that I was going to have a girl, and then Breonna Taylor. I thought that if I had a sweet, genuine, intelligent, healthy family to raise my child in, that they would be respected and looked at as an equal in this world. And then there was George Floyd. And I thought that my child would have the best of everything that I could offer them, all of the love, all of the knowledge of their history, all of the greatness that they come from. And then we have Kenosha. So I really don't know anymore. I don't know. I don't know how are we able to be seen human? How are we able to be seen as we have families? I have a mother that adores me. I have a father that would give his last everything for me. I have a community that supports me wholeheartedly. This community that we have here is not just for the privileged. It is not just for the able-bodied. It is just not for the mentally sound. It is just not for the pretty. It is not aesthetics. It is soul. It is what's in your soul. You are sitting on this grass right now sharing space with souls. Those people over there are not just over there. They are souls. They are our neighbors. They are our families. I think it is disgusting that we have bars outside of a fucking public space where every morning these people who already have nowhere to call home have to look at when they wake up and open their eyes. They have to immediately be faced with bars and imprisonment. Sometimes I wonder, is this how John Lewis felt? Is this how Malcolm X felt? Is this how Assata Shakur felt? Or is this just how we feel? I truly, genuinely need all of you to understand that we as individuals carry so much power that CPAC is going to happen. Defunding the police is going to happen. It is up to us to make sure that we have the remedy for what is the solution? When we have no more CPD, what is the solution? When we have no more crisis interventions, what is the solution? What are we actually asking for? So I wanted to end with, a lot of people don't know that our CPD, NYPD, any police force on this stolen land started off as slave catchers. You cannot separate the two. At some point, you have to understand that this is intentional. Everything that has been happening to us has been intentional. So we intentionally have to step up, put our foot down, and tell them we see you, we hear you, and we protect each other. If you see a fellow neighbor anywhere that is in dire need, help them. Lend a hand however you can, because it goes a long way. That hand that you are lending is helping deal with traumas, generational curses. You right now are setting the trend for your generations to come. When your grandchildren or your great aunts and uncles talk about you, make sure they know your story. Make sure that they know you were on the front lines making shit happen. Peace and love.
Everybody make some noise for Angela. That was very personal. It was very beautiful. Thank you for sharing with us. Our last speaker today is Mr. Frank Chapman, an educational coordinator for the Chicago Alliance Against Racism and Police Repression. Mr. Chapman lost 14 years of his life to our criminal injustice system and was freed by the efforts of the National Alliance, and he's been fighting for other people ever since. We're honored to have you with us today. Everybody, please give your very warm welcome to Mr. Chapman.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to this really tremendous, momentous event. I've seen a lot of rallies in my life, and this one matches the great ones that I've seen. The speakers have been touching and moving, because what comes from the heart touches the heart. So I'm not gonna kill the flow. I'm gonna try to keep it going. I want to tell you a little bit about myself because it's so relevant to what we're doing here today. In 1961, when I was 19 years old, I was tortured and wrongfully convicted by the St. Louis Police Department, forced to sign a confession for armed robbery and murder, and sentenced to the Missouri State Penitentiary for life and 50 years. Life and 50 years. That was the bad part. The good part is, while I was in prison, I morphed, I transformed by my own efforts and by the efforts of my comrades in prison, and by also the efforts of my comrades on the streets in the Black Panther Party. I morphed into a revolutionary. A lot of people talk about what they are today, but I'm gonna tell you what I am. I'm a revolutionary. And what do you want to be? You want to be a revolutionary? Then you got to deal with overthrowing this whole damn system. Quit playing. Piecemeal reforms won't get you there. All that does is recycle oppression. It's like recycling the ghetto through welfare. It's not gonna get you there. The only thing that's gonna get us where we need to go, you talking about abolishing the police, you talking about this, that, and the other, the only thing that is gonna get us there is to get revolution. Because, and I'm not saying that to try to discourage you or disappoint you, because you need to engage in all the struggles you are engaging in, because you're on the path. But I'm saying this so you don't get caught up in some kind of political delirium. thinking that you have a solution when you don't. The solution is getting rid of capitalism. The solution is creating a system where truly, we do like the Three Musketeers, right? One for all and all for one. So I just want to get that off, because I think it's necessary to have the right perspective when we talk about these problems. They're not just problems, people. Oppression is not just a problem. Oppression is an institution of violence and terror imposed upon the people. That's what my people have been going through for over 400 years. Violence is oppression. Oppression is violence. For people to tell me about somebody looting a store being violent, hold up. Wait a minute. Let's put some truth in it. You know, you stole my people from their continent, brought them here in chains, bled them, beat them, tortured them, broke up their families, sold them on the block like they were cattle. What are you talking about, violence? How violent is that? You gave indigenous people disease blankets with smallpox. How violent is that? You still cutting food stamps and shit. How violent is that? Don't talk to me about violence. I know about violence. I was in prison for 14 years, remember? I saw violence every day, and it was imposed upon me every day. And they didn't ask us our opinion about it. They just did it. Somebody mentioned about the police, because that's what I came up here to talk about. I was down in Kenosha last night. I said Kenosha because I know they're gonna win something. I was down there last night because I met all these young, black, Latinx, queer people. I met all these people, white people, who had such tremendous amount of courage, because they were, look what all has been done to them in the last few days. They've been tear gassed, they've been shot with plastic bullets, and they've been murdered. And they've been jailed. And I was down there with some of them who just came out of jail. And a lot of you helped to get them free too, because you called that sheriff down there and demanded their freedom. Thank you for doing that. But they came straight to the rally, out of jail, to protest and march again. Now that's what I'm talking about. We're not going to be frightened. We're not going to be intimidated. We're not going to be ran off these streets. We're going to continue to protest and get in these streets until we get some damn change in this country. Not just in this city, but in this country. Because we're tired of it. This has been going on way too long. I'm 77 years old, and I've been in the struggle for over 50 years. So this is not my first time seeing police murder somebody. I've been seeing it all my life. Like the sister said, Blake's sister said, I've been seeing it all my life. We bury the dead. We mourn the dead. But we fight like hell for the living. So what is that fight going to be about right now, right in this moment? It's what you're here for. That fight is going to be about getting government to get off, as well as the rest of these older persons, to pass CPAC. When I say CPAC, I want you to say fight back. CPAC! 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 Sound like you mean it. So why am I saying CPAC and fight back? Because that's what CPAC is. We're not promising a utopia. We're not promising that the struggle is going to be over the day we get CPAC enacted. See, that would be selling you a false dream. No, What we're saying is that in order to stop these police crimes, and in order to stop these murders now, in the moment, is for us to have community control of the police. What does that mean? To say who polices our communities and how our communities are policed. If there's going to be defunding, we need to be in control of the defunding. If there's going to be abolition, we need to be in control of that process. Don't expect the system to give you what your demands are. We got to give this to ourselves. This is what the people got to do. That's why we say all power to the people. Because the people got to do this. They're the problem. You're the solution. We're the solution. They're the problem. So don't get it mixed up. We're not asking them for change. We're not asking Mayor Lightfoot for change. We're not asking Councilman to change. Would he please go up there and sign his name on our ordinance? We're demanding it. There's a difference. We're demanding it. Oppressed people don't ask for change. They demand and fight for it. We demand it. And these are our demands. You got to have a way of carrying out a demand. It can't just be an empty slogan. That's why we have to empower ourselves to say who polices our communities and how our communities are policed. We decide. The people decide. That's a people's decision when we don't need the police anymore. We don't go up and ask the master. We don't go up and ask the capitalist bosses, hey, boss, can you get rid of these police? They ain't acting right. No, it don't work like that. We got to take power. We got to take power. And CPAC is a step in that direction. It ain't all the way. It ain't the whole 100 yards. But it's a step in that direction. And you got to have a strategy, because if you don't have a strategy, then you ain't got no tactics. And our strategy is what? Overturn the whole damn system. That's our strategy. We don't want to. A reporter asked me, when the George Floyd Rebellion first kicked off, I call it the George Floyd Rebellion, Breonna Taylor Rebellion. When it first kicked off, the reporter came up to me and says, okay, what if you get CPAC? What then? What do you want? I said, we want every damn thing. We want everything. Because that's what you took from us. You took everything from us. So we want everything. In fact, you don't get to make no damn deals. You don't get to make no deals. If this is done right, you don't get to make no deals. Because when we overturn your ass, you don't get to come back and say, well, can I have this? Can I? No, you don't get nothing. We want everything. We want it all. That's what it's got to be about. Got to be about it all. So we're going to end like we started. All power to the people. All power to the people. All power to the people. Now I'm going to put a Fred Hampton thing on you. When I say I'm a revolutionary, I want you to do this. I'm a revolutionary. I'm a revolutionary. I can't hear you. I'm a revolutionary. I'm a revolutionary. I'm a revolutionary. Thank you, because that's the only way this is going to happen.
Give it up one more time for Frank Chapman, everybody.